Welcome to the Gold Standard Radio Show. I'm Craig Goldenfarb, your host and the founder of GOLDLAW. We've been a personal injury law firm in West Palm Beach for 25 years. This is the show where we spotlight the individuals and organizations making a real impact in our communities. Those who embody excellence, integrity, compassion, and the gold standard in everything they do. Every week we'll sit down with game changers, difference makers, and unsung heroes who are shaping the future of Palm Beach County and beyond. Whether it's through advocacy, innovation, or service, these are the people setting the bar high and showing us what it truly means to lead with purpose. So sit back, get inspired, and let's dive into the stories that define the gold standard. Hey, I'm Craig Goldenfarb here with one of my good friends for a long time, elder law attorney Mark Shalloway. So I just wanted to get right into it, Mark, and talk about what your firm, Shalloway & Shalloway, does for the community. And Mark, you and your firm, Shalloway & Shalloway, have built a wonderful reputation in Palm Beach County in an area of law called elder law. Can you share the story of how your firm started and what inspired you to focus on this narrow area of law?
Well, first, Craig, thanks for the opportunity to share this with those listening, because I'm quite passionate. Elder law really grew organically out of an aging population. You know, advances in medicine and science and public health. People needed help learning how to live with diminished capacity before they actually passed away. And so I just had the good fortune of being born when I was to help work with pioneering this field. And we really deal with how to pay for long-term care, whether it's for a home health aide or an assisted living or a nursing home, mostly due to chronic illness like Alzheimer's or stroke or Parkinson's, and really come from a camp of traditional wills and trust lawyers that were historically more focused on death and taxes rather than what I call the IIs, incapacity and impoverishment.
So it sounds like there's a distinction between estate planning, which is more like wills and trusts, and elder law. So could you describe that for the listener? Because most of us don't see the difference between estate planning and elder law.
That's great. I get this a lot. I think that generically estate planning is about organizing your affairs. And again, in the past, it was mostly for what happens when we die, when we pass away. The focus has expanded, I should say, because that remains pretty compelling to get your affairs in order after your passing. But with wills and trusts and powers of attorney, I like to think of them as tools in a box that lawyers use, and we're just adapting them to help us with this fundamental goal I mentioned earlier about getting the best care and paying for it without going broke. So for instance, in my practice, I'm going to be accessing all kinds of public and private resources to help pay for that home health aide or assisted living and nursing home. And I need to make sure that the spouses, and typically the spouses and the children, have all of the requisite legal authority over finances and over health care to access those resources. So my review of wills and trusts and powers of attorney are with an eye towards how will these function during a spell of, let's say, stenosis, neuropathy, vision or hearing loss, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, that kind of condition. And again, continue to serve the role of instructions for what happens when we die. So they may be the same tools, yeah.
So that's great. It sounds like the typical estate planner deals with those two things we all know are inevitable, death and taxes. And yes. Elder law focuses a lot on the health care of the aging population, make sure we do the right things while we're alive to make sure our family doesn't have such a burden. Is that a fair summary, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. And I get a little more nuanced in that, again, we typically think of healthcare as access to doctors, hospitals, skilled personnel with a healthcare degree, with therapists like physical, speech, and occupational therapist, anybody with a college degree, and a healthcare license. And that, of course, remains very, very important. However, when it comes to coping with and getting the best care possible for Alzheimer's and stroke and Parkinson's, we also need that unskilled custodial care That is care that can be delivered by a spouse or an adult child if they didn't have their own aging health issues or their own work and family to cope with, as well as geography, because a lot of our clients have moved and retired to Florida, and their children, if they have children, are maybe scattered, and again, working in their own careers and trying to put their own immediate family members away. So it's a pretty complex dynamic to work through.
Wow, it sounds like an area of law that many people aren't aware of. So thank you for doing what you do, Mark. Let me move on to, it's funny, I'm a personal injury attorney here in West Palm Beach. You've been an elder law attorney for so long. I'm trying to remember how we met. I think it may have been through the Palm Beach County Bar Association. Do you remember how we met many years ago?
Craig, I think we have such a long history together, it could actually be kind of challenging, but I must tell you what stands out of my mind is typical of what I see about your professional life, which was your kind of commitment to the community, including your own legal community, which is pretty diverse. You know, you describe being a personal injury attorney, I an elder law and special needs law attorney, and you graciously provided some financial underwriting for one of our elder law bench and bar dinners, where the local Palm Beach County elder law attorney community works with the courts, you know, to understand the needs of both stakeholders and establish, you know, professional aspirations and keep a dialogue going. And I remember we got acquainted working for that event to be successful with, again, the financial help of your firm.
Well, I remember doing that for many, many years. I'm doing it again this year. I like to support other types of lawyers because, you know, lawyers don't have the greatest reputation in the world, but I do love to support all areas of law, not just for referrals, but for the fact that we all really went to law school for the same reason, and that's to help each other out with helping our clients in such a wonderful field where we get to help so many people. So it's my honor to have sponsored that seminar for many years. And I think you're right. I think that's how we met, Mark. So going back to elder law, is there a common misperception that people have about elder law? And, you know, when I first heard the term way back when I was a baby lawyer, I'm like, what the heck is that? So what is a common misperception people might have?
Yeah, I have to say, the misconception may be just a lack of clarity. It seems like a little bit of a vague and nebulous term. When you think of lawyers by field, it's usually the subject matter. For example, you're self-described as an attorney help address personal injuries, right? Or a real estate lawyer or a divorce lawyer. So elder law really shifted the focus on our clients, the older adult. And that actually, under the board certification program by the Florida Bar, embraces 13 discrete areas of practice, like wills and trusts, advanced healthcare decision-making, guardianships. Certainly, to varying degrees, lawyers will focus not necessarily in all 13 areas. Tax, and one of the core functions, though, Greg, is the planning for long-term care asset protection using Medicaid. And that's Medicaid with a D, not to be confused with Medicare with an R. And in particular, the long-term care Medicaid program, which can help pay for home health aides, assisted living, or nursing home care.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So as our parents get older, they may need long-term care or home health care. And I know there's some eligibility rules of when they can be eligible for Medicaid. So what exactly is Medicaid planning?
Right. So the first thing I like to say when asked is to really clarify some distortions and misperceptions that are often emotionally triggered when you use the word Medicaid. You may think of food stamps or welfare or scuzzy, disgusting nursing homes or something like that. And that's really going to be very self-defeating. Medicaid long-term care program is what I would say the gold standard, no pun intended today, for this program, of financing long-term care. And that's because it comes from the ubiquitous need. Everybody aging typically has a spell of diminished capacity, and it was a program under federal and state partnership law that was built in the 1960s Great Society legislation alongside Medicare. And what happened is we had this sort of discrimination by disease in this country, which I love. So for instance, somebody like Warren Buffett can have his triple bypass paid for by Medicare. and that's fine. I don't begrudge him. But a retired school teacher, Betty, may be walking down the sidewalk, collapse of a stroke, need care beyond the hospitalization, cannot rehab fully with physical therapy, and may either need a home health aide or assisted living, or actually remain in a nursing home for the rest of her life.
And Medicare doesn't pay for that, huh?
No, but Medicare, it's not a failure of the program to follow through. It was never designed for long-term unskilled custodial care. It was a program, and is a program, for this short-term skilled acute care by anybody with what I call a white lab coat, the doctor, the therapist, nurses. So Medicaid was not as compelling when it was first born because, as I mentioned earlier, not as many people were living as long as they are now. So we're seeing this huge age wave coming in over planet Earth, not just here in the United States, where people are living longer. And it's creating a lot of challenges and a crisis of confidence in how we manage this cost of care. So Medicaid had asset caps and income caps, financial eligibility rules that were not at all modeled like Medicare, where I mentioned, you can get, regardless of your wealth, your health care. Both programs, you pay into the system. And that's something that I think is really important to bring up. Because just like in tax planning, when you engage in lawful Medicaid planning, you're doing truthful disclosures of everything, and you are simply navigating through a complex set of federal and Florida rules to be able to create eligibility for the benefits of Medicaid.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to the gold standard. At GOLDLAW, we live by 6 core values: respect, integrity, innovation, compassion, success, and finally, the gold standard. Because good enough is never enough. These same core values are what drive the incredible leaders we feature as guests right here on the Gold Standard Radio Show. If you need a law firm that stands for excellence, fights for justice, and truly cares about you, give us a call at 561-222-2222. Because at GOLDLAW, we don't just represent cases, we represent people. So remember, choose the twos, choose GOLDLAW.
Every day, 1,500 children in Palm Beach County wake up in foster care through no fault of their own. They have been torn from everything they know, facing fear, uncertainty, and unimaginable hardships. Many have suffered neglect, abandonment, or abuse, and now they must navigate a complex system that often falls short of meeting their needs. But they're not alone. That's where Speak Up for Kids steps in. We provide life-changing advocacy, life skills training, and essential resources to help these children heal, grow, and thrive. From educational support to everyday necessities, we bridge the gaps so they can have a future filled with possibilities. But we cannot do it alone. These children need champions, someone to stand in their corner, fight with them, and remind them they are valued and not forgotten. Will you be that champion? Visit www.speakupforkidspbc.org today and take action. Your support, whether through donating, volunteering, or simply sharing our mission, makes all the difference. Together, we can bring hope, stability, and a future to children who need it most. Don't wait. Take action now. Visit www.speakupforkidspbc.org and be the hero they deserve.
Welcome back. So let me see if I can boil it down so
Sure.
even a personal injury lawyer can understand it. So for my dad, Medicare is automatic, I think, after age 65 and covers what you would say is acute situations. Is that fair?
That's great.
And there's no income cap. In other words, you can be pretty rich, like you said, Warren Buffett, and you can still get Medicare coverage, right?
That's correct.
And then Medicaid steps in, but because Medicaid is longer term, it's got some limitations on, and one of those limitations is income, like how much you're worth or how much you earn, right?
Right. They look at finances in those two ways: assets, like the balances in a cash stock or an IRA, in a home or a car, and they also look at monthly income, typically like a social and a pension.
So Medicaid certainly fills a need in our aging population, in that once you're done with the Medicare benefits that are for acute care, you need ongoing care. So it sounds like Medicaid is very important.
It is critical, and ignorance can be very devastating to your dignity and your financial security.
So I hate to get political, but there's a lot of movement at both the federal and state level here in Florida on reducing Medicaid benefits. Could you tell me about that?
Well, we're talking about it today, and yet, the program has been around since 1965, and we've had conservative and liberal administrations, and we've seen an ebb and flow over time. However, remember, the word Medicaid is an umbrella program that got a lot of attention in the national media with the Barack Obama's administration, where they were trying to expand Medicaid for uninsured people altogether with skilled care. So the long-term care program has been subject to a lot of reform, sometimes tightening, sometimes expanding coverages. And so it's not always negative. A quick example, Craig, Medicaid said that if we use Betty as a fictitious person and she is middle class, a typical client, okay? She has a home, she has a car, she's got $100,000 of cash in stock and a $50,000 IRA. Okay. Now we have clients who have more assets than that too, but they're not necessarily multi-bazillionaires. And the reason they're doing this planning is because a nursing home today, at least in our market, is running $12,000 a month to $18,000 a month. Okay. And an assisted living facility, like I like to call like hotels with help, are running more like $3,000 to $10,000 a month. And home health aides are running about $30 an hour. Now, if you only need an aide, for an hour once a week, you can swing it. But if you need, 5, 10, 15 hours or maybe 24 care, it becomes unsustainable. So, yes, Congress and the states will always be looking at it. We've got sentinel organizations like the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys that I presided over in 2008 that collaborate with other aging network organizations to try to help show, for example, in the 1990s, they expanded Medicaid for an assisted living benefit, which will help because Medicaid will pay for the care portion of an assisted living stay. And in fact, one of the most popular programs is Medicaid's home health care program, which is completely a complete free buffet of benefits. So for instance, Betty can age in place at home, maybe with her husband, Mike, and get 5 to 8 hours a day of a free home health aid, diapers or incontinence supplies, travel to and from doctors because she can no longer safely drive, Life Alert subscription. So if she, heaven forbid, falls, the first responders can come and attend to her needs. Even meals can be brought in. So there are, as advocates, we would say, attacks on the program. But I got to say, people who plan will typically fare better than people who throw up their hands going, oh, well, it could be under attack. Yeah, it's like a 2-hour movie I've been watching since it started decades ago. And there will be the tightening and the expansion. I think the ebb and flow. We've just got too many people to completely eradicate something like this.
So are you? I'm a little pessimistic with the current administration on Medicaid, but you think it's going to last and it will be sustained, I hope.
I think some version of it, and I'm not trying to be overly optimistic, without a doubt. But I think that it's just such a compelling component of our society that.
Me too. I think we obviously with the aging population, and I use my father as an example where he needs long-term care. He's in an assisted living facility, and to be able to qualify for Medicaid is something that is not cheating, even if you have a certain net value. I mean, the government allows you to do what you do, which is to structure assets such that someone who has a net value or a net worth, or someone who has an income can still apply and get Medicaid. Is that right?
And that's absolutely right. Let me just give a quick example following up on your father's situation. I mean, if he's at an assisted living facility, I mentioned they'll run $3,000 to $10,000 a month, depending on whether it's built out like the Econo Lodge or the Marriott or the Ritz-Carlton. And there's really 3 parts to that bill: a room, board, and care. Now, Medicaid will pay the care, which can knock off $1,500, $2,500 a month, leaving your father, for instance, still obligated to pay a fair share, okay, which would be for the apartment rental and the 3 meals at the dining room. So all this planning that we've talked about, not actually give examples how it's done, are are really with full disclosure of bank statements and financial account statements and deeds from the source. So there's no fraud. In the same way, you can take a tax deduction lawfully with full disclosure versus tax fraud.
That's a really great analogy. I mean, people, when I talk about Medicaid planning, the cynical public sometimes says that's cheating if you're worth a lot of money or you have an income, but it's really only paying for a third of what an older person would be expected to pay. They're expected to pay room and board, but Medicaid planning gets them that much needed health care. Is that true?
I would agree. Right. Every client I've ever really had, I can't think of an exception, was more than happy to pay out of pocket. They just need it to be remotely affordable and sustainable, because when they need that care in that season of their life, they're going to need it for the rest or the remainder of their life, not just for a bone fracture heal.
And you know, what's interesting to me is the room and board is something that I would expect an older person to be responsible to pay, whereas healthcare is something that is offered by a skilled professional. So, and it's so expensive. So I think it just my fairness button is alerted in a good way now, which I'm like, now that I understand Medicaid planning, I'm thinking, yeah, that makes sense, because the public is looking at this as a waste of money. And in fact, it's so fair the way it's designed. Would you agree?
I really would. I think that also when people are thrust into a situation where they are coping with chronic illness or injury, it really is like the expression, the appearance of the bull changes when inside the ring. and it is a very intimidating, overwhelming prospect to lose executive functioning and to see your mind desert the body or the body desert the mind. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mark. So there's a lot of complicated healthcare and financial decisions. I know for my father, I have like a living will. I have a healthcare surrogate, which allows me to make choices on my father's behalf regarding healthcare. Along with him, it doesn't take away his rights. Do you have a story where you had a particular impact on a client where your guidance or your efforts made a life-changing difference for the family?
Well, I would like to think that I am not making it a self-aggrandizing anecdote here, but it does remind me of one of the collaborations that I had, not only with my family, but with actually you and your firm, Craig. We had a gentleman that ran a small business, a little local grocery market with his wife and family. He had a need for, I would say, probably it's a trifecta of healthcare problems. He needed a feeding tube, a ventilator, and kidney dialysis, along with, of course, help with dressing and bathing and feeding and toileting. And he was in a particular specialty hospital that said, we can only discharge you to the Northeast. And this is a man who lives in Palm Beach County, Florida. And his family were really working to just make ends meet. And your firm helped with pro bono trial advocacy to help them do a more robust discharge plan and keep them local, where they could have dad and husband in the family fold the way they even worked throughout their lives. And so we secured Medicaid. You secured the dignity piece of keeping them local. And I find very few things that could be as gratifying as that.
Well, I remember that story, and the ability to keep a loved one local for their care is so important as your parents age, as we want to be with them. So I thank you for that effort and keeping that gentleman local so his family could be with him. I think that's a great example of how what you do really can affect person's day-to-day life. So thank you for that, Mark.
Thank you, Greg.
Sure. So talking about that, speaking of not self-aggrandizement, but also pushing what you do for a living, how is it that your firm, Shalloway & Shalloway, tries to distinguish itself from other elder law attorneys?
Well, I subscribe to a philosophy that I believe really benefits our clients and our families. I like to begin with credentialing. I am very proud of the professional background. For example, being a member of the charter class of Florida Bar Board Certified Elder Law Attorneys, also being one of the first 300 in the nation for being a national certified elder law attorney, recognized by the American Bar Association, and then serving in in those roles, enriching my practice by, again, mentioned before, I was the president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys back in 2008, Governor Childs, and then later Governor Bush. Two Florida governors appointed me to advocate and inspect local nursing homes and assisted living facilities. So it got me out of my glass building and into the hallways and the resident rooms about what their hour-by-hour, day-by-day life was like, so I could help advocate for these husbands, wives, moms, and dads. And I am an accredited Veterans Administration attorney, and basically I work so that rather than making aggrandizing statements about my experience, I don't think anybody's been practicing longer. We've at least tried to credential with these objective benchmarks of skill and knowledge and specialization.
Well, Mark, having worked many years with you, I can certainly attest to the fact that your firm really, really goes above and beyond and really cares about the families that you help. So again, thank you for that. So we're starting to wrap up, but in summary, from an elder law perspective, are there certain documents or certain things that you think every family should have as their parents age?
Absolutely. In a forum like this, Greg, the best service I could comment I could make to that question is work with a board-certified elder law attorney. Most of my colleagues will provide either a free consultation, like our office does, or they will extend a very affordable initial consultation. Investing in yourself, your mom, your dad, your spouse, to become educated, because while, yes, I could rattle off the tools in the toolbox that we lawyers use, I think trying to just jot those down from this broadcast, like a will, a trust, a power of attorney, it really kind of misses the point. I think it's about being educated to the cost of care, how Medicaid can be made affordable, addressing heads-on the concerns that you might have about quality of care and all those things.
That's wonderful. So if a person wants to get started, particularly with your law firm, it's Mark Shalloway at Shalloway and Shalloway. Why don't you provide for the listeners your website and your phone number if they want to get started?
Well, thanks again for this opportunity, Craig. So the website is my last name, Shalloway.com. So that's SHALLOWAY.com. And the phone is 561-686-6200. That's 561-686-6200.
That's wonderful. So, Mark, thank you so much for your time today. It's very educational, not only for the listeners, but also for me because of my parents' situation. So we've had a wonderful talk today about elder law. I'm here with Mark Shalloway of Shalloway and Shalloway, and I'm Craig Goldenfarb. This was The Gold Standard. That's a wrap on another episode of The Gold Standard Radio Show. A huge thank you to our guests for sharing their incredible journey and for being a true beacon of excellence in our community. At Gold Law, we believe that when we lift others up, we all rise together. If you know someone in our community making a difference, someone who lives and breathes the gold standard, we want to hear about them. So please reach out, connect with us on social media, and let's continue celebrating the people who are shaping a brighter, stronger future for all of us in Palm Beach County. Until next time, I'm Craig Goldenfarb. So stay inspired, stay committed, and keep raising the gold standard.